How could you drag my parents into this?
I didn't drag them into anything. I just told them the truth.
The smell of burnt coffee and desperation hung in the air of Hartwell Insurance like a bad omen. I sat at my desk, staring at another open enrollment packet, wondering when exactly my life had become a series of deductibles and coverage limits. Calvin Mercer, 42 years old, licensed insurance agent, and apparently the kind of man whose wife needed to shop elsewhere for affection. Not that I knew it yet. Not officially. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Cal, you look like someone pissed in your cornflakes, Neil Brennan called from the next cubicle over, his Boston accent thick as molasses. Neil had been my closest friend since college, the kind of guy who could make a funeral seem funny. Lydia, still giving you the cold shoulder treatment? I glanced up from the paperwork. When isn't she these days? That was the understatement of the century. My wife Lydia had been acting stranger than a cat in a dog park for the past 3 months. New clothes that cost more than my car payment, late meetings that somehow required full makeup touch-ups, and a phone that was always face down like it was hiding state secrets. Maybe she's planning a surprise party, Neil suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe it any more than I did. Yeah, and maybe I'm going to win the lottery and retire to Tahiti. I shuffled through another claim form. If there's a frequent liar program, she's definitely platinum elite status. The morning dragged on with the usual parade of fender benders and water damage claims. Around 11, I overheard 2 secretaries from the break room gossiping near the copier. I saw Lydia Mercer at Chez Laurent last Tuesday, whispered Sandra from accounting. She was all over some guy in an expensive suit, definitely not her husband. Poor Calvin, replied Janet. If my husband acted as clueless as that, I'd probably have a side piece too. My pen snapped in half. I spent my lunch break sitting in my car, staring at the dashboard and trying to process what I'd heard. Chez Laurent was the kind of restaurant where appetizers cost more than most people's entire meals. Lydia had told me she was working late that Tuesday. When I got back to the office, she was waiting. Jenny Shore stood by my desk like a ghost in a gray coat, clutching a manila envelope against her chest. I knew Jenny peripherally. She was married to Evan Shore, some hotshot marketing executive who worked downtown. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Mrs. Shore? Can I help you with something insurance-related? She glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. 3 months, she whispered, her voice barely audible. 3 months they've been carrying on. I have kids, Mr. Mercer, 2 little boys. I can't let him leave us for her, but I can't fight this alone. She pressed the envelope into my hands. Make them pay. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me holding what felt like a bomb with a lit fuse. I waited until everyone had left for the day before opening it. The contents hit me like a freight train loaded with karma. Screenshots of text messages between Lydia and Evan Shore, dozens of them, dating back 3 months. Hotel receipts from the Marriott downtown, photos of them together at restaurants I couldn't afford, and the real kicker, credit card statements showing that Lydia had been using our joint account to pay for everything. The hotel rooms, the lingerie from Victoria's Secret, even Uber rides to pick up Evan when his car was in the shop. I sat there in my empty office, fluorescent lights humming overhead, reading message after message of my wife planning her new life with another man. The most recent exchange was from that morning. Lydia. Cal's been suspicious lately. We need to be more careful. Evan. Just a few more weeks. I'm telling Jenny this weekend, then we can stop sneaking around. Lydia. I can't wait to be done with this charade. He's so pathetic, always talking about insurance policies and actuarial tables. You make me feel alive again. Evan. Soon, baby. Soon we'll have everything we want. I closed the envelope and leaned back in my chair. Most men in my situation would probably cry or get drunk or punch something. But I'm an insurance man. I assess risk for a living. I calculate probability and plan for worst-case scenarios. And right now, I was calculating the premium on revenge. You want to play dirty? Game on. But you picked the wrong guy to underestimate. I spent that night sitting at my kitchen table, making copies of everything while Lydia slept upstairs. Every text message, every receipt, every piece of evidence that proved my marriage was a sham. I scanned them, saved them to 3 different cloud accounts, and made physical copies that I stored in my office safe. Paranoia is just foresight with better public relations. Lydia came down around 7, already dressed for work in a new outfit I'd never seen before. The price tag was probably still hiding in our credit card statement under business expenses. "You're up early," she said, not quite meeting my eyes as she poured coffee. "Couldn't sleep. Big day ahead." I kept my voice neutral, watching her carefully. "How was your evening with the girls last night?" She paused, just a fraction too long. "Fine. We went to that new wine bar on 5th Street. Nothing exciting." According to the credit card statement, she'd spent $200 at the Marriott bar. With Evan. "Sounds fun. Maybe I'll take you there sometime." "Maybe." She grabbed her purse and keys. "I'll be late tonight. Another client dinner." "Of course you will." After she left, I called in sick to work and drove to downtown Hartford to see the best divorce attorney money could buy. Margaret Chen had a reputation for being ruthless, expensive, and worth every penny. Her office looked like it was designed to intimidate cheating spouses into submission. Dark wood, leather chairs, and law books that probably cost more than my car. "Mr. Mercer," she said, settling behind her massive desk. "I've reviewed the materials you sent over. This is quite comprehensive. I'm thorough by profession." Indeed. The good news is that Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, and adultery can definitely factor into asset division. The better news is that your wife has been remarkably careless with evidence. I slid another folder across her desk. "There's more. I've been doing some digging into our finances. Turns out my loving wife has been more creative with our money than I realized." Margaret's eyebrows rose as she flipped through bank statements and credit card bills. She's been funding the entire affair with marital assets, hotel rooms, gifts, dinners. "Mr. Mercer, she's spent almost $15,000 of your money on this relationship." "That's what I figured. What are my options?" "We file for dissolution of marriage citing adultery. We freeze all joint accounts immediately. We document every penny she's spent on this affair and seek reimbursement. And," she smiled like a shark, "we make sure her boyfriend's wife gets copies of everything for her own divorce proceedings." "How long will this take?" "If she contests it, could be months. If she doesn't," Margaret shrugged, "could be wrapped up in 6 weeks." I wrote her a check for the retainer. "Let's make sure she contests it. I want this to be as public and humiliating as possible." "Mr. Mercer, I like the way you think." That afternoon, I made my first move. I called our bank and had my paycheck redirected to a new individual account. Then, I called our credit card companies and reported the cards as potentially compromised, freezing them pending security verification. By 5 o'clock, Lydia's plastic was useless. She called me at 6:30, furious. "Calvin, what the hell did you do? My card was declined at the grocery store. I'm standing here like an idiot with a cart full of food and no way to pay for it." "That's strange," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Maybe there's been some fraudulent activity. You know how careful we have to be these days. I'll call the bank tomorrow and sort it out." "This is ridiculous. I have that client dinner tonight, and now I can't even—" "I'm sure Evan will be happy to pick up the tab." Silence on the other end of the line. Long, telling silence. "What did you say?" "I said I'm sure your client will be understanding about the payment issue. These things happen." More silence. Then, "I'll be home late." "I'm sure you will." She hung up without saying goodbye. I poured myself a scotch and sat on the back porch, watching the sunset and planning my next move. Tomorrow, I'd pay a visit to Lydia's parents. Dot and Steve Rowan were good people who'd raised their daughter to be better than this. They deserved to know what their little princess had been up to. And Evan Shore? Well, Evan was about to learn that some risks come with very expensive premiums. My phone buzzed with a text from Neil. Want to grab drinks? You've seemed off lately. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Neil was a good friend, but this wasn't the kind of problem you solved over beer and sympathy. This required precision, patience, and a complete understanding of how to systematically destroy someone's life without breaking any laws. Lucky for me, I'd spent 20 years learning exactly that. The next evening, I invited Dot and Steve Rowan over for dinner. Lydia had texted that she'd be working late again, which gave me the perfect opportunity for some family bonding. "Where's Lydia?" Dot asked as she settled into our dining room chair. "I was hoping to see her." "She's been working a lot of late nights lately," I said, setting down a plate of takeout Chinese food. "Very dedicated to her clients." Steve nodded approvingly. "That's our girl. Always been a hard worker." "Oh, she's definitely been working hard." I excused myself to the kitchen and returned with the manila envelope. "Actually, I wanted to show you both something. I think you should know what your daughter has been dedicating herself to." I spread the contents across the dinner table like a poker hand. Photos of Lydia and Evan at romantic restaurants, hotel receipts, credit card statements highlighting every expensive gift and intimate dinner. Dot's face went white. Steve's fork clattered to his plate. "What is this?" Dot whispered. "This is what Lydia's been doing for the past 3 months instead of working late." I pulled out my phone and read directly from the text messages. "Cal's so pathetic, always talking about insurance policies. Evan makes me feel alive again." Steve stood up so fast his chair fell over. "This can't be real." "It's all real, Steve. Every receipt, every message, every lie she's told us both. She's been using our credit cards to fund her affair. $15,000 of our money spent on another man." Dot started crying. Not quiet tears, but the kind of sobbing that comes from watching your child destroy everything you taught them to value. "I don't understand," she said through her tears. "You two seemed so happy. At Christmas, at Easter." "Apparently, I'm a better actor than I thought." I gathered up the photos. "I wanted you to hear this from me before it becomes public record. I've filed for divorce." Steve's face had gone from white to red. "Where is she? Where's Lydia right now?" "Room 412 at the Marriott downtown, if her pattern holds true." Dot stood up, her maternal instincts overriding her shock. "We're going there right now. This ends tonight." "Dot, maybe we should—" "No, Steve. No maybe. Our daughter is destroying her marriage and humiliating herself, and I won't stand for it another second." They left without finishing dinner, Dot clutching the hotel receipt like evidence in a murder trial. I cleaned up the takeout containers and settled in to wait for the fireworks. Lydia burst through the front door at 10:30, her hair disheveled and her makeup smudged. Behind her came Dot, looking like an avenging angel in a cardigan. "How could you?" Lydia screamed at me. "How could you drag my parents into this?" I didn't drag them into anything. I just told them the truth about where their daughter spends her evenings. "You had no right." "I had every right." For the first time in months, I let my anger show. I had the right to know why my wife was spending our money on another man. I had the right to know why she's been lying to my face for 3 months. And your parents had the right to know what kind of person they raised. Dot stepped forward, her voice shaking with disappointment. "Lydia Marie Rowan, you explain yourself right now." "It's complicated, Mom. You wouldn't understand." "Try me." Lydia looked between us, trapped and desperate. "Calvin and we've grown apart. Evan understands me in ways that—" "Evan understands your credit card number," I interrupted. "That's about it." You don't know anything about our relationship. I know he's married with 2 kids. I know his wife is filing for divorce. I know he's been using you for closeness while you've been using me for money. I pulled out my phone. Want to hear what he said about you to his buddy Mike last week? Her face went pale. You're lying. I played the audio recording I'd gotten from Jenny Shore. Evan's voice filled the room. Lydia's fun, but she's getting clingy. Once the divorce goes through, I'm thinking about taking that job in Seattle. Fresh start, you know? The silence that followed was deafening. Dot slapped her daughter across the face. 22 years of marriage and you threw it away for that? Lydia touched her cheek, tears streaming down her face. Mom, don't. Just don't. Dot turned to me. Calvin, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what she's done to you. It's not your fault, Dot. We raised her better than this. Steve's voice was barely a whisper. We taught her about commitment, about honesty. Some lessons don't stick, I said quietly. Lydia looked around the room at the 3 people who had once loved her unconditionally, seeing the disappointment and disgust in our faces. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. How was it supposed to happen, sweetheart? I asked. Were you going to wait until Evan got his divorce, then tell me you'd found someone else? Were you going to keep spending my money until there was nothing left? Or were you just going to disappear one day and leave me to figure it out? She had no answer. Dot and Steve left without saying goodbye to their daughter. Lydia went upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. I sat in my living room, listening to her sob through the ceiling, and planned my next move. Tomorrow, I'd pay a visit to Evan Shore's office. It was time to introduce myself properly. Evan Shore worked for a mid-sized marketing firm called Pinnacle Creative, housed in a glass tower downtown that screamed, "We charge too much for our services." I'd done my homework on Mr. Shore, 38 years old, senior account manager, drove a restored 1967 Mustang that he loved more than his wife. I walked into Pinnacle's lobby at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying a briefcase and wearing my best suit. The receptionist, a young woman with too much makeup and not enough experience, looked up with a practiced smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "Calvin Mercer from Hartwell Insurance. I have some documents for Mr. Shore regarding his policy review." "Oh, I don't think Mr. Shore is expecting—" "It's regarding potential fraud in his expense reports. Time-sensitive matter." Her smile faltered. "Let me call up to his office." 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from Evan Shore in his corner office, watching him sweat through his expensive shirt. He was exactly what I'd expected, tall, conventionally handsome, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having faced real consequences. "Mr. Mercer," he said, trying to project authority, "I'm not sure what you think you're doing here, but I'm here to discuss your relationship with my wife." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "And your creative approach to company expense accounts." His face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because I have 3 months of receipts showing company dinners at the same restaurants where you've been taking Lydia. Same dates, same times, same credit card." I spread the documents across his desk. "Either you're dating my wife, or you've figured out how to be in 2 places at once." Evan stared at the papers like they might burst into flames. This is harassment." "No, this is evidence. Harassment would be if I sent copies of these to your boss, your wife's divorce attorney, and the IRS. I leaned back in my chair. "Though now that you mention it, what do you want?" "I want you to understand something, Evan. You picked the wrong man's wife to steal. I'm not some clueless husband who's going to cry into his beer and let you ride off into the sunset. I'm a professional risk assessor, and right now, you represent a very significant risk." I pulled out my phone and showed him a video. "This is your wife dropping off our kids at school this morning. Sweet boys. They look just like you." "You stay away from my family." "Your family? You mean the family you're abandoning for my wife? The family that's about to lose their house because you've been embezzling company funds to pay for hotel rooms?" Evan's hands were shaking now. I haven't embezzled anything. No? Then how do you explain billing the company for client dinners that were actually romantic dates? How do you explain using your corporate credit card for hotel rooms during business trips that never happened? I stood up and walked to his window, looking down at the street below. You know what I love about insurance, Evan? It's all about calculating risk versus reward, and right now, your risk-to-reward ratio is completely messed. You can't prove any of this. I turned back to him, smiling. I don't have to prove it. I just have to create enough doubt to destroy your career. One anonymous tip to your boss about expense account irregularities, and they'll audit everything. How long do you think it'll take them to find the pattern? Evan slumped in his chair. What do you want? I want you to end it with Lydia, today. I want you to tell her you've realized what a mistake you've made and that you're going to work on your marriage. And if I don't? Then by tomorrow morning, your boss will have a very interesting folder on his desk. Your wife's attorney will have an even more interesting folder, and the IRS will receive an anonymous tip about potential tax fraud. I picked up my briefcase and headed for the door. Oh, and Evan, stay away from my wife, because if I see you within 100 yards of her again, I'll make today's conversation look like a friendly chat. I left him sitting in his office, staring at the evidence of his own stupidity. But I wasn't done, not even close. That afternoon, I drove to Evan's neighborhood and parked across from his house. The 1967 Mustang sat in the driveway like a shrine to his vanity. Cherry red, perfectly restored, probably worth more than most people's annual salary. I waited until dark, then made my move. The next morning, Evan's screams could probably be heard 3 blocks away. I'd filled his beloved car with 200 live crickets and dumped a gallon of fish sauce on the interior. The smell was indescribable, and the crickets had made themselves at home in every crevice of the vehicle. Someone had filmed his meltdown and posted it to the company's group chat. By noon, Cricket Car Evan was trending in local social media circles. But the best part came that afternoon, when Lydia called me, hysterical. Calvin, what did you do? Evan won't return my calls and people are saying you went to his office. I introduced myself. Seemed like the polite thing to do. This has to stop. You're ruining everything. I'm not ruining anything, sweetheart. I'm just making sure everyone understands the true cost of their decisions. Evan says it's over. He says he can't see me anymore. Smart man. Smarter than I gave him credit for. I love him. No, you love the idea of him. You love the expensive dinners and the hotel rooms and the feeling of being desired. But love? Love doesn't steal $15,000 from the person who trusts you most. She hung up on me, but I could hear her sobbing before the line went silent. That evening, Neil called me. Cal, I heard some crazy rumors today. People are saying Lydia's been cheating, and you've gone completely off the deep end. People say a lot of things, Neil. Is it true? About Lydia? I hesitated. Neil had been my friend for 20 years. He deserved honesty. Yeah, it's true. Jesus, Cal, I'm sorry, I had no idea. Nobody did. She's a good actress. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure she faces the consequences of her choices. There was a long pause. Cal, be careful. I know you're hurt, but don't do anything that'll come back to bite you. Don't worry about me, Neil. I know exactly what I'm doing. But as I hung up the phone, I wondered if that was really true. 3 days later, Lydia's world began to collapse in earnest. It started at her office. Lydia worked for Meridian Financial, a mid-sized accounting firm where reputation meant everything. I'd done my research and discovered that her boss, Richard Hawthorne, was a devout Catholic who took a very dim view of moral impropriety among his staff. So I arranged for Mr. Hawthorne to receive an anonymous package containing printed copies of Lydia's text messages, along with a note explaining that one of his employees had been conducting an affair using company time and resources. Lydia called me at 10:30 that morning, her voice shaking with rage and panic. You bastard! You sent everything to my boss! I have no idea what you're talking about. Richard called me into his office this morning. He had printouts of my private messages, Calvin. My private conversations. That's terrible. Identity theft is a real problem these days. Don't play dumb with me. I know it was you. Can you prove it? Silence on the other end of the line. I didn't think so, I continued. By the way, how did that conversation with Richard go? I imagine he wasn't thrilled to learn that his star employee has been using company computers to plan hotel rendezvous. He's putting me on administrative leave pending a full investigation. That's unfortunate. I hope you've been saving money for a rainy day. You're destroying my life. I'm not destroying anything, Lydia. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light. She hung up on me again, but not before I heard her start to cry. That afternoon, I received a call from Margaret Chen. Mr. Mercer, we need to talk. Your wife's attorney has been in touch. Already? That was fast. She wants to settle. Full asset division, no contest, no public trial. She's also agreed to reimburse you for the $15,000 she spent on her affair. I leaned back in my office chair, smiling. What's the catch? No catch. She wants this to go away as quietly as possible. My guess is she's realized how bad this looks for her. And if I say no? Then we go to trial. Everything becomes public record, and she loses even more. Mr. Mercer, this is a very generous offer. I'd recommend taking it. How long do I have to decide? She wants an answer by tomorrow. I spent that evening sitting in my living room, staring at the divorce papers and thinking about the past 3 months. Part of me wanted to drag this out, to make Lydia suffer through a public trial where every detail of her betrayal would be aired for the world to see. But the rational part of my brain, the insurance man's brain, knew that Margaret was right. This was a good deal. I'd get most of our assets, the house, and my money back. Lydia would be left with nothing but the consequences of her choices. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone face the natural results of their actions. I called Margaret the next morning and accepted the settlement. But I wasn't quite finished with Evan Shore. That weekend, I made a few phone calls to the right people and discovered something interesting about Evan's beloved house. The man cave he'd built in his backyard, the one he'd bragged about in his text messages to Lydia, had been constructed without proper permits. In fact, it violated several HOA covenants and city building codes. On Monday morning, the Homeowners Association received an anonymous tip about unlicensed construction at 1247 Maple Street. By Tuesday, they'd issued a cease and desist order. By Wednesday, the city had gotten involved. By Friday, Evan was looking at a $20,000 fine and a court order to tear down his precious man cave. I drove by his house that afternoon and watched him standing in his backyard, staring at the demolition crew tearing apart his sanctuary. He looked like a man who'd finally understood that actions have consequences. Jenny Shore called me that evening. Mr. Mercer, this is Jenny Shore. I wanted to thank you. For what? Evan signed the divorce papers today. Full custody of the boys, the house, and most of our assets. His lawyer told him he didn't have much choice, given the evidence. I'm glad things worked out for you, Mrs. Shore. There's something else. Evan lost his job today. Pinnacle Creative let him go after they completed their audit of his expense accounts. I felt a small surge of satisfaction. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not, and neither am I. Her voice was stronger now, more confident. He made his choices, Mr. Mercer. Now he gets to live with them. After I hung up, I poured myself a scotch and sat on my back porch, watching the sunset and taking inventory of the past week. Lydia had lost her job, her lover, and most of our assets. Evan had lost his job, his family, his house, and his precious car. Both of them were facing the reality that their grand romantic adventure had cost them everything that actually mattered. But as I sat there in the gathering darkness, I realized something was missing. I didn't feel better. I felt empty. Revenge, it turns out, is a lot like junk food. It tastes good going down, but it doesn't really nourish you. My phone buzzed with a text from Neil. Hey, want to grab dinner tomorrow? I'm buying. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, Sure, I'd like that. Maybe it was time to start rebuilding instead of just tearing down. I should have known it wasn't over. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting in my kitchen, eating a microwave dinner and reading the newspaper, when someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking. Pounding, like they were trying to break it down. I looked through the peephole and saw Evan Shore standing on my porch, swaying slightly. Even through the distorted glass, I could see that he was drunk, disheveled, and holding something in his right hand, a baseball bat. Open the door, Mercer, he shouted. We need to talk. I stepped back from the door and pulled out my phone, opening the app for my home security system. If this was going to get ugly, I wanted it recorded. Go home, Evan. You're drunk. You destroyed my life. He pounded on the door again, harder this time. My kids won't talk to me. I lost my job. I lost everything. You did that to yourself. Bullshit. You orchestrated all of this. You manipulated everything. I heard a car door slam outside and looked through the window. Lydia was getting out of a beat-up Honda Civic, looking as desperate and wild-eyed as Evan. She'd lost weight, and her hair looked like she'd been running her hands through it for days. This was about to get very interesting. Evan, stop! Lydia called out as she hurried up my walkway. This isn't going to solve anything. He ruined us. Evan turned toward her, the bat still in his hand. We had everything planned and he destroyed it all. We destroyed it ourselves, Lydia said quietly. We made the choices, Evan. We have to live with them. I opened the door, but kept the security chain attached. What do you want? Evan pushed forward, his face red with alcohol and rage. I want my life back. Can't help you there. Try a time machine. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you won? I think I survived. That's different. Lydia stepped closer to the door. Calvin, please, just let us explain. Explain what? How you spent 3 months lying to my face? How you used my money to fund your affair? How you threw away 22 years of marriage for a man who was planning to abandon you anyway? Her face crumpled. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mistakes are forgetting to pay the electric bill or burning dinner. What you did was a choice. Every text message, every hotel room, every lie, those were all choices. Evan raised the bat. Open this door right now or I'll break it down. Go ahead. I'm live streaming this whole conversation to the neighborhood app. Half the street is probably watching right now. That stopped him cold. He looked around and noticed that several neighbors had come out onto their porches, drawn by the shouting. Mrs. Patterson from next door was openly filming with her phone. You're insane, he said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. I'm thorough. There's a difference. I unhooked the security chain and opened the door fully, stepping out onto the porch. Evan was bigger than me, younger than me, and armed. But he was also drunk, emotionally unstable, and surrounded by witnesses. You want to hit me with that bat, Evan? Go ahead. Make sure Mrs. Patterson gets a good angle for the video. He looked around at the growing crowd of neighbors, then back at me. The bat wavered in his hands. You destroyed everything, he said again, but the fight was going out of him. No, I just made sure everyone could see what you'd already destroyed. I stepped closer to him, my voice dropping to a whisper. You want to know the truth, Evan? I didn't have to work very hard to ruin you. You'd already done most of the work yourself. I just helped people notice. Lydia started crying. Not the pretty tears of a woman seeking sympathy, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who'd finally understood the magnitude of what she'd lost. I'm sorry, she said through her tears. Calvin, I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know. I know you're sorry, Lydia. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry it didn't work out the way you planned. You're sorry there were consequences. I looked between her and Evan. But you're not sorry for what you did. If you could go back and do it again, but smarter this time, you would. She didn't deny it. Evan let the bat drop to his side. So what happens now? Now you both leave. You get in your car, you drive away, and you never come back to my house again. You figure out how to rebuild your lives, and you leave me out of it. And if we don't? Evan asked. I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. Then I'll remind you that I'm really, really good at destroying things when I put my mind to it, and next time, I won't be nearly as gentle. The crowd of neighbors had grown larger. I could see Neil pushing through the group, concern written all over his face. Behind him came Tom and Sarah from down the street, Mike and Jennifer from across the way, and at least a dozen other people I'd known for years. These were my people, my community, my real life, not the fantasy that Lydia and Evan had been chasing. "Calvin!" Neil called out. "Everything okay here?" "Just fine, Neil. Mr. Shore and my ex-wife were just leaving." Evan looked around at all the faces staring at him with disgust and contempt. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and completely out of options. "This isn't over," he said, but his heart wasn't in it. "Yes, it is." I turned my back on him and walked toward my neighbors. "It's been over for a long time. You just didn't realize it yet." I heard their car doors slam behind me, followed by the sound of Lydia's Honda starting up and pulling away. The crowd began to disperse, but Neil stayed behind. "You okay, buddy?" "Yeah, I think I am." "Want to talk about it?" I looked at my house now, not ours, and then at the street where I'd lived for 15 years, surrounded by people who actually gave a damn about me. "You know what, Neil? I think I'm done talking about it. How about we just grab a beer and watch the game?" "Sounds perfect." As we walked toward my front door, I heard thunder rumbling in the distance. A storm was coming, but for the first time in months, I wasn't worried about weathering it. I'd already survived the worst thing that could happen to me. Everything else was just rain. And as I closed the door behind us, shutting out the past and all its ugly complications, I realized something important. Revenge might not heal you, but sometimes it clears the air enough for healing to begin.